Hello, my name's Claire from Claire Tyler Couture. Today I want to talk to you about making scrubs. At the moment there's lots of things we can do to help the NHS, but as sewers we can help by making scrubs. And there are lots of Facebook groups out there that you can join to find out who your local coordinator is for your local hospital, and then you can find out what they need, or you can maybe ask for GP surgery. I thought it'd be a nice idea, we're making for local midwives and GP surgeries, and I thought it'd be a good idea to run through the process and show you what we're doing, and give you some tips along the way. So the first thing you need to do is get your fabric, and you can use cotton or polycotton fabric. The main thing is that it can be washed at 60 degrees, a nice high temperature, and most of the colours that people are using are blue, but there are lots of other ones that you could use. So again, check with your coordinator to find out what they need. This is a 100% cotton. When you get your fabric, wash it at 60 degrees and give it a press, and then it's ready to go. Before you wash it, a couple of things you can do. I like to overlock the raw edges. So it's generally about 3.5 metres of a 150 centimetre wide fabric that you need. So cut it into lengths, it makes it a bit more manageable. Overlock the raw edges, that will stop them coming all unravelled in the washing machine, and press out that centre crease if it's been folded in half, because that will stop it setting. And then you can wash your fabric and it's ready to use. So that's the fabric. Patterns, there are lots of patterns available as well. You can download them, you can get printed copies. Again, the Facebook pages, a lot of them have got downloadable patterns. So grab yourself a pattern and some fabric and we'll get started. So I've got my pattern and fabric prepared. This pattern is the print at home version, so you print it out on A4 and then stick it all together, so it's quite quick to do. If you're doing that at home, do check the scale to make sure you're printing out the right size to the right scale. A couple of things that I've already changed. When I printed this out, it printed the whole front and the whole back. So the front was one piece and the back was one piece. So I've cut those in half. So I've now got half of the front here. That means I can place this pattern piece to the fold of the fabric, and the same with the back. I can place them to the fold of the fabric. And if you're doing a small, medium or large size, that generally means that you can fold the fabric into the middle and get both pieces next to each other. So I've got the selvages of the fabric here and the fabric folded into the middle. It also means that you could do more sizes, because you could have that, this is medium, this side, and the other half that I got I'll do as large. So it just gives you more options. I've also cut the front and back neck facings in half so they can go to the fold as well. I think it's a bit more economical on fabric if you have things placed to fold. If you're doing several pairs, you could think about cutting more than one at once, so layering up your fabric. I've managed to cut 3 pairs at once, so have a go at that if you're confident enough to do that. Do cut more than one pair, it's a little bit quicker as well. Another thing that I have done, the front pocket piece, the front pocket is a patch pocket, and you're supposed to stitch it on around 3 sides. But what I've done is I've lengthened this by 6 centimetres. So I've put an extra 6 centimetres on the bottom here, so that when I place the pattern on, place the fabric on, the bottom of the pocket will be neatened with the bottom of the top, a tunic. So I will show you that when we come to the construction. I'll show you that, but add an extra 6 centimetres onto the bottom of your pocket piece, and that should save a bit of time later on. So I've got my pattern pieces on the fabric here, and the front and back facing, and then I'll do the sleeve after I've cut these bits out. So that's the next thing to do, will be to cut out all your pieces and then come back to me. I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I thought I'd show you the cutting out of the trousers at this point as well. So here's my trouser pattern. Again, it was the download pattern that I've stuck together. A couple of things to say about this. There's a grain line on the front here, but there's no grain line on the back. So I've just marked the centre of the leg in 2 places and then drawn my grain line here. So this will be my grain line here. Okay, the other thing is with this one, I'm just going to pull this forward so I can point it out. There's a little cutout here. I would ignore this. It's a nice pocket, but for speed wise it's a bit more fiddly, so I would just cut this straight out here. And you'll also see you've got this particular pattern that both the pocket pieces one of them's got a cutout and one of them hasn't. Don't use this one. Just cut this one, cut out 4. Okay, so ignore that one and just cut 4 of this one. Okay, so you can do inseam pockets with that piece, and then we've also got a patch pocket to go on the back as well. So I've placed my pattern piece on the fabric like this. This is the best use of the fabric. Now, generally, when I'm teaching dressmaking, I would say to have your pattern pieces directional, which would mean you would have both of them this way round. But you can see straight away that that's not the most economic use of the fabric. And because we're making uniforms, but also we're using a fabric that has no direction to it. So I think in this case we can forego that, one of my very important dressmaking rules, and turn the pattern round and have it like that, just to be more economical with the fabric. So you can pin your pattern pieces on, making sure that the grain line is parallel to the edge of the fabric, either the fold or the selvage. This time the fabric's folded in half rather than to the middle. So check that the pattern piece is exactly parallel to the edge. There, we don't want our trousers twisting, so make sure they're straight, and then pin your pattern pieces on and cut those out as well. Just a quick mention that the patterns that I'm using are unisex patterns, so they tend to be quite long, so you may want to check the leg length on them as well. So that's it. Cut out your trousers as well, then we'll come back and start the construction on the top first of all. So once you're all cut out, the next part of the construction is to overlock some of the edges, or neaten some of the edges. If you haven't got an overlocker, you can zigzag them. And to start off with, I'm going to go through each piece and tell you where you need to overlock. So I would neaten the top shoulder pieces here, and then down the sides and across the bottom on each piece. If you want to, you can just go down each side and come off and start again. If you'd like to learn how to turn corners with an overlocker, there's a video for doing that, for turning curves and corners, on my YouTube channel, and you can just click the link in the top corner and that will show you how to do that. So that's the front. On the back, let me show you the back. Here, so here's the back, and again I've done the shoulders here and then down each side and across the bottom. That's the back. The sleeve, down the sides and across the bottom, there. And your pocket, you'll have 2 pocket pieces, go round all 4 sides for that piece. And then lastly, the facings. Now the facings, the front and back facing will need to have interfacing on it. This is a fusible interfacing I've just ironed on. So that's the front facing and the back facing. And then I've joined them together at the shoulder seams and overlocked around the edge. So that's the wrong side and that's the right side. So fuse the interfacing on, join the shoulder seams and then overlock around the edge. So that's the next steps that you need to get on with, and then come back to me and I'll take you to the next step. We're going to start with the pockets. So the first thing you need to do is turn over the top edge by 3 centimetres, give it a press, and then you're going to stitch along here. Once you've done that, so this one is stitched across the top here, you're then going to turn under each of the long edges by 1 centimetre. Like that. So both long edges will be by 1 centimetre, and press those. What we're going to do next is put them onto the top of your scrubs. Let me just grab that piece here. And 1 pocket on each side. So the bottom of the pocket, like I mentioned, is lined up with the bottom of the scrubs here. That will get neatened with the hem. And then the side here needs to be 3 centimetres in. Get my tape measure. And I shall measure that. So the side of the pocket needs to be 3 centimetres in from the edge. There. Like that. And then you're going to stitch down each side. So that's the next thing to do, is to get your pockets all prepared and then pin and stitch them to the front of your scrubs top. I've stitched the pockets on now, so I've done that quite close to the edge there, so that's nice and secure, and done a couple of reverse stitches at the top as well. I haven't gone across the bottom because that's going to, like I said, that's going to be in with the hem. So once your pockets are on and you're happy with those, we're now going to do the shoulder seams. So we're going to get the front and back right sides together at the shoulders and pin those in place. The seam allowance on this pattern is 1 centimetre, but do check that the seam allowance for your pattern that you're using. And I know we have a lot of discussion about which way to pin in the sewing room. I like to use my pins like a tacking, so they are parallel to the edge and roughly where I'm going to be stitching. And when you're pinning, if you have your edges away from you when you're putting your pins in, then they'll always be in the right direction to take out when you come to the sewing machine. So we're going to pin and stitch our shoulder seams, and once they are stitched, you're then going to press those open. So that's the next step for you to do. Okay, the shoulder seams are stitched and I've pressed them open, and now we're going to put the sleeves in flat. So I'm going to turn this, shall I do the sleeve underneath? Do this way round. The sleeve on top. So I've got the sleeve here, and like I said, we've overlocked the sides and the bottom, and this pattern has got 1 notch here, and that 1 notch means that's for the front, and I've got a notch here for the front, and there's also a notch at the top of the sleeve, and that notch should meet your shoulder seam. So I'm going to match that one first, and match the notch for the front, and then pin this all around. And we didn't neaten this edge because I thought it would be easier to stitch this seam and then not neaten the edges together for this one. So we're going to pin the sleeve in. It should fit in quite easily, it's just a flat sleeve. So just pin it in, and then we're going to stitch this with the same seam allowance you've been using everywhere else. And then I'm going to overlock these 2 edges together. And then I'm going to press the seam, and the seam will get pressed towards the sleeve, so down the arm. So that's the next bit to do, is to pin and stitch your sleeves in, neaten them with the overlocker or a zigzag, whatever you're going to be using, and then press the seam towards the sleeve. The sleeves are sewn in now, and I've pressed the seams towards the sleeve that way. That's this way towards the sleeve. So now we can do our side seams. So bring your front and back together. Let me just get that so you can see. Here we go. Front and back together, and we're going to stitch down the side. So we're going to stitch down the sleeve and then down the side. So make sure your seams match at the underarm here. That's quite important, just for neatness. And pin from the edge of your sleeve, and we're going to go down to the top of the split. Now there isn't, on the pattern that I've got here, there's no real measurement for this, so I'm going to say in line with where the fabric comes out there, we're going to stitch down level with that. Does that make sense? So you can see some of your patterns may have a dot here, but this was the download that we stuck together, didn't have many markings at all. So where the curve comes out, there's a point there, and I'm going to stop stitching at that point on both sides. So you could measure that from the bottom and put a dot yourself. Would be quite a good idea, so you can make sure you have the same on both sides. So we're going to stitch the side seams all the way down on both sides, and then press the seams open. Side seams have been stitched and pressed open, and I've pressed back the little facings for the splits as well. Before we stitch these, it's always much neater to turn up the hem first. So we're going to turn the hem up 3 centimetres. So just press it up, and that at the front here, of course, you've got the pocket in as well. So turn it up 3 centimetres, give it a press, and then you can pin it in place and stitch the hem all the way around, front and back. Once you've done the hems, then you can turn the splits back like this and stitch just around the edge of the overlocking, and you can go straight across there, or you could do a point into the middle seam, whichever you feel more confident with. So straight up next to your neatening and then across. Okay, so we're going to do the hems and neaten the splits. That's the next bit to do. I've done the hem. I've gone up and across the split as well, and I've done a second row of stitching along the bottom here as well, and that just makes sure that the bottom of the facings are stitched in place as well. It's nice, makes it nice and strong. So I've gone across the hem and up around the splits, and then the second row there. And I've also turned up the hems on the sleeves as well and stitched those in place. So that's all nicely finished off, the hems on the bottom and on the bottom of the sleeve. So now we're going to do the facing to neaten up the neckline. So the first thing I've done is I've marked the V on the front here with some chalk, and I've actually done a line of stay stitching here. So if this is not marked on your pattern, all you need to do is measure the seam allowance, which on this pattern is 1 centimetre, and draw a line here and the same in this direction, and then where those two lines meet, that's going to be the point of the V on our neckline. So that's got a bit of reinforcing stitching on there. And I've got the facing here, which we interface at the very beginning with our nice lightweight interfacing. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to mark a point. So I want to know where I want to be turning. So my seam gauge is on 1 centimetre. I'm going to mark 1 centimetre in that direction and 1 centimetre in that direction. And then where those two lines meet, that's going to be the turning point. Okay, so that point there. Now I'm going to pin the facing to the neckline, matching the shoulder seams, matching the V at the front. Then I'm going to stitch that on and come back to me, and I'll show you how to do the snipping and the next step. So you can see I've stitched my facing on here. So now we need to do some snipping. The first thing we need to do is snip right down to that V. I'll turn this round so I get it really neat here. And you want to go as close into the V as you can without cutting the stitching. That means it will turn out nicely. And then we're going to do trim some of the seam allowance. And I'm going to layer this seam, so I'm just going to trim away half of the seam allowance of the facing. So the bit that's got the interfacing on, trim that down to about half all the way round, just to layer the seam. And then because the back neck facing has got a slight curve on it, we're also going to do some snips around the back neck. Just get that trimming done. And then I'll show you the next step. There we go. And then on the back neck here, I'm going to do some snips. So just at a slight angle up to your stitching, all the way across the back neck. And that will help that to turn in. Now the other thing we're going to do to help this neckline stay in is we're going to understitch. Now understitching is where you stitch your facing to the seam allowances. So you fold the facing over and you're going to be stitching 2 or 3 millimetres away from the seam. And you can't go all the way into the point, so I'll probably start about a couple of centimetres up, and then putting the facing and the seam allowances all in one direction towards the facing, I'm going to stitch a couple of millimetres away from the seam. Now you can do that by eye, or I sometimes use a ditch foot. This is a ditch foot on a Janome, that's S, and it's got a long guide in the front here which would sit in the ditch of your seam, and you can place that there, and then you can move your needle over a few places if your machine will allow you to. Move your needle over and then all you've got to do is keep that guide in the seam and you'll be stitching just to the side of it. So whichever way you decide to do it, we're going to understitch this seam around the neck. Your scrub tops are now finished. I've understitched the neckline, as you can see there, and pressed it all through to the wrong side. And you could, if you wanted to, you could top stitch around here to help it to stay in place. But what I've done is I've just stitched the facing along the shoulder seam here, and that will hold the facing in place. So give it a nice press. Don't forget to put a label in the back with the size in it, and you could do a fancy label if you've got one, but at least if it had the size in the back so they know what sizes they are. And that's the top finished. So let's move on to the trousers. We've cut out our trousers, and the first thing we're going to do is the pockets on the back. So I've marked the pocket placement from using the pattern, just with some chalk that disappears when you iron. That's Taylor's soap. So you can use a friction pen if you're working with a pale colour. With a dark colour you need to use something like this. And then we're going to make up our pockets. So the same as we did with the pockets on the top, turn over the top 3 centimetres and press it. So actually I've overlocked around the edge first. So neaten the edges first. Turn over 3 centimetres and press, and then stitch the top bit down. And then we're going to turn in the edges by 1 centimetre like we did before. But this time we've also got to turn up the bottom as well and give that a press. So that's our pocket all pressed. Then we're going to take it to the trouser back piece, match the tops. I've got both pieces here, so I'm just going to move one out of the way so I don't pin right through. There we go. So match the one top corner to that dot and the other top corner to that dot. And then pin all the way round and stitch the back pockets on. So that's the first job to do, is to stitch your pockets onto the back of your trousers. That's the back pocket on. It's nicely top stitched around the edge. And now we're going to do the side pockets. So these are the side pockets here. You should have 4 of those, all the same. And we're going to pin 1 to each side of the back, side seam on the back, and 1 to each side on the front. Now my pattern didn't have any markings for the pattern placement. Yours may well have it. I'm going to do mine 7 centimetres from the top. There, so I'm measuring 7 centimetres down and getting that in the right place. There. And I'm going to pin these edges together. 1 each side of the front trouser leg and 1 each side of the back. And I'm going to stitch that on just inside the seam allowance. So if your seam allowance is 1 centimetre, you want to go just inside it so it's slightly smaller. And that will help the pocket to stay inside nicely. So go ahead and stitch that one on, and then you're going to overlock or neaten just this area here that you've stitched. So you've got 4 seams to stitch and 4 little bits to neaten with the overlocker. So I've stitched my pocket on and I pressed everything towards the outside, and then I've understitched. So as we did around the neck on the top, I've understitched the pocket to the seam allowances at the side here. I'll just show you, I did neaten that little bit as well with the overlocker before I did the understitching. The next thing you need to do is a buttonhole on each side of the front piece. So that when we turn this top down and we thread our drawstring through, they'll have a buttonhole here. So the buttonhole, again, there was no marking for this on my pattern, so I have done mine 5 stitches from the top, 5 centimetres from the top, sorry, and 4 centimetres in, and I've done the buttonhole 1 inch long, and that's because I've got 1 inch wide tape, so when it comes through, that will be able to come through the buttonhole here. Now you don't need to have, if you're not familiar with your buttonhole foot on your machine, your one-step buttonhole, we have got a video for that, and you can click the link in the top corner there, and that will take you to the video on how to do machine buttonholes, and that shows you putting a button in the back of the machine of the foot. But you don't have to have a button in the foot to do a buttonhole. You can just pull the back of the foot out to the size you want it to be. Do a few practice ones to get the right size. Before I did this, I did put a little bit of interfacing on the back there as well. So I've got a bit of fusible interfacing on it. So do a few samples of your buttonholes so you get the right size, and then stitch your buttonholes on the front. So once you've got all that ready, we're then going to do the side seams and the inside seam on each leg. So we're going to get one front and one back piece and place them right sides together like this. So for the side seam, the outside leg, I'm going to pin down the side and around the pocket. So make sure everything's nice and flat here. And on top of each other. And you're going to pin down the side and around the pocket. So what you might want to do here to be really accurate is give yourself some turning points. So I'm just going to pin this a little bit, pin this pocket together just to give it a bit more secure, here. And we'll be coming up this way here. I'll be coming all the way up here to here, and then we'll need to turn and go down the leg. So you might want to give yourself some turning points. Now the seam allowance on this is 1 centimetre. So here I'm measuring in 1 centimetre here, and I'm measuring in 1 centimetre here. And that's where I need to turn at that point. And here I measure 1 centimetre here and 1 centimetre on the pocket. I'll put that pin out so I can do this. You can see where you need to turn. Now you could come up to in a point there, but that's going to make the opening a bit small, so I'm going to take that across. But I know that that line there and that line there are the same distance from the edge. So I'm going to come down here to that point, around the pocket, and then across and then down the leg. So that's the outside seam done, and once you've stitched that you can then overlock around that as well. And then also the inside leg, so matching up the crotch points here, you're going to pin, I'm going to turn this over because I want to have my raw edges away from me so that I have my pins in the right direction. So from this point here all the way down. So what I normally do when I'm stitching is pin the top and pin the bottom here, and then pin in between, and then you know that everything's gonna work. So you're going to stitch your outside leg around the pocket and then overlock it, and your inside leg just from the crotch seam to the bottom of the hem, and overlock those as well, and give them a press, and then we'll come back to do the next bit. So these are pressed. I've done both the seams. Because we've done the side seams together and overlocked them, you'll need to press that side seam towards the front so that the pocket is going the right way. So those are stitched and pressed, and I've also undone the buttonhole as well, so that's all ready for the next step as well. So this trouser leg is inside out. I've got the other one here the right way out, and I'm going to put it down inside this one like that, so that I can match up the crotch seams. So match up the inside leg seams here, and then pin all the way up to the front and all the way up to the back, and that's the next seam to do. So get that pinned and stitched and overlocked and pressed, all of those things. And then come back to me and we'll talk about finishing off the trousers. Okay, the crotch seams are stitched, the buttonholes are opened here, which is important to do before the next bit we're going to do, which is turning down the top. So I'm going to turn down the top 4 centimetres here, 4 centimetres, and pin that around and then stitch. So I've neatened this top with the overlocker, by the way, and I've also neatened around the bottom hem as well with the overlocker, so that's all ready to be turned up. So I'm just turning this down 4 centimetres and pinning all the way around, and then I'm going to stitch that, and you can come back to me for the last bits. So that's our scrub trousers finished. I've stitched around the top here, and I've also done an extra row of stitching close to the edge just to strengthen the casing, and then I've used a safety pin to thread the cotton tape through. I've just cut the cotton tape at an angle here, but if you wanted to, you could turn this over and stitch it. That would also be equally as good. And I've done the hems as well on the trousers. So that's the trousers from the front there, and we've got our side pockets, and on the back with the patch pockets, and they'll go perfectly with the top that we've got here. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. We'll be doing another video of making a scrub bag so the NHS workers can put their uniforms into them at the end of the shift and keeps everything nice and clean. All the equipment we've used today is listed down below, so you can see what we've used. Please do like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel to find out what else we've got coming up soon, and you can also follow me on social media. So thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you soon.